of you who aren't familiar with RMI or our partners, Rios partners, a little bit about those organizations. Rocky Mountain Institute is a not-for-profit think and do tank centered here in the Rocky Mountain regions, but working globally to transform global energy use to create a clean, prosperous, and secure future in all localities. And specifically, RMI has been working with business and industry to try and bridge institutional barriers to solve some of the most complex problems that face the various industries in the energy transformation. For our Electricity Innovation Lab, we specifically work with Rios Partners, which is a group, it's a social enterprise that works with business, governments, and other institutions to take unique approaches to solve complex challenges. And these are just a few of the folks that we've shared photos of who have been involved in the Electricity Innovation Lab, as well as eLab Accelerator, leading and designing this program for driving transformation in the electricity industry. So our objectives for the webinar today are to provide all of you with an overview of eLab and our eLab Accelerator event in particular, to provide some specifics around Accelerator, including what is the event designed to provide, what types of projects and groups are well suited to join us for Accelerator, what makes a strong Accelerator project. We'll talk a little bit about the application process for Accelerator, and then we'll have some time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about the agenda for the webinar, and then we'll also get into a little bit of webinar logistics. So we'll take a few minutes to give you guys an overview of the Electricity Innovation Lab, and then we'll get into what we do with eLab Accelerator in particular. Then my colleague Jason Meyer, who's joining us for the webinar, will give you some background on Accelerator teams and projects. And then we actually have two of our graduating teams from our 2015 event that have joined us for this webinar to tell you more about their projects as well as their experience at eLab Accelerator. And then Jason will tell you a little bit more about the application process for Accelerator, and then we have time for questions and answers at the end. So, as I mentioned, a few webinar protocol items. First, all of our participants are on mute and will remain on mute for the duration of the webinar. For our presenters who are joining us from afar will remain on mute until we introduce them, and then you'll have an opportunity to talk through your portion of the presentation. If you do have a question, please submit your questions in the webinar control window pane. Our colleagues here at RMI will be looking through all of the questions and then helping us to address those at the end of the presentation. Please only use one audio option. Using both telephone and computer audio can cause system interference. We are going to be recording this webinar for future viewing and reviewing. And then if you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please contact our colleague Courtney, who's here with us and is helping us to manage the system. One more note on the questions. Please feel free to share your questions with us at any time during the presentation. We may get to some questions during the presentation, but we'll try to look at all of the questions at the end of the session as well. So I'd like to give everyone a bit of an overview of RMI's Electricity Innovation Lab. eLab is a very unique program that RMI has been helping to facilitate for over 3 years now. And it's a national collaboration with leaders, change agents, and influencers from across the electricity system who are working to find ways to enable distributed energy resources like solar, microgrids, energy efficiency to become a core resource in the grid. And that really requires that we not only take a unique approach to problem solving, but that we think about new solutions around business models, about the way we value distributed resources, and about the way we regulate the electricity system. And so we're really looking to work across stakeholder groups to develop these solutions that can accelerate the economic deployment of distributed resources. In the Innovation Lab, we think about the diffusion of innovation and specifically have built the activities within eLab to take advantage of this innovation diffusion approach. And this is a recognition that we need to, one, understand the current reality and the complexity of the problem that we're dealing with. And this really sets the foundation for the work of the lab. And this is where we need to take a multi-stakeholder approach that is representative in its participation. It includes sort of all of the voices that are part of the industry and part of the problem, that we need to take a systemic approach, or what we call a whole systems process, to really make sure that we're looking at the entire problem. And then we need to be building the capacity of the individuals working with us to actually be change agents that can take new solutions to their organizations and to deploy them in industry. And at this foundation, by looking at the current reality, how can we illuminate leverage points or particular places where we can take action and apply new solutions that have been never tried before? So from working in this, what we call this safe space, new ideas about solutions can emerge. And then what we work to do is with the participants in eLab and with the actors in the industry, how can we build confidence around new ideas through research and dialogue? And then how can we help actors like yourselves take these new ideas and actually turn them into real solutions at companies and at utilities or in our communities, and actually test out these new approaches? And then how can we take these new approaches and then scale them more broadly through the industry? And so eLab is working to bring people together and then move ideas through this innovation diffusion. And in particular, our eLab Accelerator event is sort of working at this scaling level, where we're trying to help the best thinking and sort of the best solutions that are emerging in the industry and really bring them together with practitioners who are ready to deploy them within their own communities and organizations. So now for a bit of an overview of eLab Accelerator in particular. eLab Accelerator is an invitation-only working meeting that's designed to help us accelerate high-potential and high-impact teams from across the country and across the world who are working on really cutting-edge projects, exploring solutions at the electricity system's distribution edge. It's a very unique event, and what we're trying to do with this unique approach is to help accelerate projects by working with their teams and support them in taking their project to the next level. Second, because eLab has access to so much of the best thinking in the industry, we're really looking to try and make the very best thinking around solutions and the deployment of distributed energy resources to make that as accessible and available to these project teams at the event. So really, how can we make those insights and approaches available to the teams we work with? And then the third thing we're trying trying to do is really help create a network and a community amongst the practitioners that are actually working on these solutions. And how can this network share resources and best practices and ideas that help all of us do what we're trying to do better and faster? Some things that teams are specifically going to find when they come to eLab Accelerator is that we've put a lot of thought into the design and sequence of the event. And so it's really a structured working session for you and your partners to make progress on your project or initiative. It's also this incredibly valuable learning experience to not only learn from the national experts that join us as faculty for the event, but also to learn from your peers that are working on very similar or related projects, but perhaps in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. And how can we help you by having better access to this broader pool of ideas and thinking? The other thing that we do is we recognize that many of you, in the work that you're doing, because you are taking on something for the first time or you're trying to do something that's generally unprecedented, that you may need tools or resources that you've never had to call upon before. And so we try to provide training and other resources at Accelerator to really help you think about ways you can collaborate and innovate in the project opportunity that you have. We are also trying to create an environment where you can build alliances and a support network that is going to help you succeed during and beyond the Accelerator event. And then lastly, for a variety of reasons that we design into the event, this is really going to be a unique environment that is meant to foster creativity and collaboration on the project that you're working on. Part of why we emphasize these attributes and tools that we want to provide is because we recognize that working on the kinds of projects and issues that you're working on requires a pretty unique approach, and that we need to recognize that these opportunities are complex in different ways, and it's not sufficient for us to ignore those different types of complexity. And so this is something that is pervasive throughout RMI's eLab and all of the work we do with the electricity industry. Is this model of the social change lab, which recognizes that we need to take a systemic, participative, and creative approach to overcome these challenges, because our challenges have a social dynamic, a social element to them. They have what we call a dynamic element to them, in that our problems are changing while we work on them. And then they have what we call a generative dynamic to them. And that is, they're new problems that have never been solved before, and so we can't take past solutions to try and address a fundamentally new problem. And so by thinking about the complexity of these opportunities in this way, we're specifically trying to design both an event, a venue, and a process that lets us work on all of these aspects in a really comprehensive, creative, and collaborative way. And we think that this is going to maximize the opportunities for you to make really meaningful progress on your projects, and also as a team and as individuals. So here's a bit of an overview of what happens at Accelerator. On the first day, we take some time with all of the teams to provide some more training around this unique approach that we think really helps people find solutions and work with each other in a better and more effective way. On the second day with the teams, we're working with these groups to build a shared foundation around the projects that will support them to to build momentum and forward direction. We also think it's very important to take time the second day to be really clear about what are the biggest questions and what are the biggest issues that the team has. Because often we come at those particular topics with a very individual lens, and how can we, by bringing all of our individual vantage points together, have a better picture of the current opportunity we have that enables us to find these leverage points for action and for solutions. On the third day at Accelerator, we really work with the team to think about who are the other folks or other resources that are going to be critical to success, and how do we get them involved? And we also start to build actual solution hypotheses. Given what we've learned about the opportunity we have and the reality and the complexity of it, what are things that we can actually do to move the ball forward? We also, on this third day, work with teams to clarify next steps around what needs to be done. And importantly, we build in quite a lot of time for our faculty and to the other teams in attendance to provide feedback to one another. So you're actually going to get this great opportunity for constructive criticism on the work that you've done before you have to go home and actually start implementing some of these ideas. The last day is really about refining this plan for action and moving your project forward. And then we also have a sort of culminating session where the teams are both able to ask for and offer support to one another. And we ask the teams to gather what we call commitments to make next steps to advance their projects. Something that's very special about Accelerator is this role of faculty. So through the Electricity Innovation Lab, RMI's had the great opportunity to work with thought leaders, experts, executives from across the electricity industry who really have incredible experience and perspective on what new business models can look like and what innovation districts can look like and how can we improve the value proposition for distributed energy resources. And there's an incredible opportunity by inviting and having these experts join us at Accelerator that your projects can benefit from the very best thinking on some of these subjects like financing for renewable energy and distributed energy projects, around technical functionality of microgrids and other resources, around the evolving regulatory landscape, that we can make the very best thinking and tools on these topics available for our teams. And then our faculty have the opportunity to actually get involved and be hands-on with many projects, many more projects than they would otherwise have time or ability to become involved with, because we've brought everyone together at Accelerator. So it's a great shared opportunity for both our teams and our faculties. And so you can see some of the expertise that they bring, and this is just a representative list. We look at the pool of teams that joins us and try to build a faculty that will best meet their needs. And you can see this list of previous faculty that have joined us, several of whom will probably join us again for 2016. And then one of the last things I just want to point out before I pass the baton to Jason is one of the things that we think is really critical to working on our problems and our projects in this unique way is going to a unique place. Is how can we get out of our conference room? How can we get out of the business suits? How can we get out of the spotlight and chaos of public proceedings and things that will be covered by the press, and come to a different place to have a different, more impactful conversation about what we can do with the opportunities that each project team has. And that's why Accelerator for 2016 will be held at the Sundance Mountain Resort in Utah, because we think there's actually very unique value in working on these issues in this different way in this retreat-like setting. With that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Jason Meyer, who's the manager for eLab Accelerator in 2016, and he'll tell you a little bit more about Accelerator projects and introduce some of our past project teams.
Great. Thank you very much, Leah. We'd like to spend a little bit of time now to jump into the specifics of typical Accelerator teams, both the teams and the projects that they work on. And we'll also introduce two of our previous teams from 2015 to discuss a bit about their experience at Accelerator and thoughts on the application process as well, and also to give a little bit more insight into the project types that we're going to discuss here. We have two representative project types in those examples from 2015. And after that, we'll wrap up with some information on the application process itself, and then we'll transition to question and answers. So just a little bit about Accelerator in terms of its actual project focus, and I think that's a really good way of thinking about Accelerator is the project-focused element of it. For 2016, we'll have approximately 15 teams, and so these 15 teams represent different projects clustered around three primary project themes that we'll discuss here shortly. In our experience, a team is representative of approximately 6 people, and that number is a little bit flexible, but it's really representative of the size of a team that allows for a dynamic and nimble conversation that yet has meat and content and can actually have real discussions and make real progress over the course of 4 days. If you have too many people a part of a team, it becomes a little bit cumbersome and burdensome. And too few, it's very difficult to really unpack some of the meatier elements of projects or really have kind of detailed discussion. Each team has what we call a team champion, and this is somebody that's not just a logistical point of contact for RMI and the event to represent the team, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. Somebody that champions the project itself, helps build the team and the coalition around the project, and is really able to kind of prepare the project for Accelerator, sustain the momentum during the event, and help support efforts afterwards. And in our experience, the team champion is a really critical piece to a project being successful both before, during, and after Accelerator. Another element is projects are at this sweet spot of maturity where an experience at Accelerator, that type of intervention is really meaningful and impactful. So projects can't be too early on. They can't be hypothetical or something that's just the kind of the seed of an idea that people are starting to work on. And they can't be too mature in that decisions or development or ideas that are generated at Accelerator won't have any impact because the project is too far along its execution life. Finally, the team itself is a really critical ingredient to an Accelerator project. As Leah mentioned, our teams are multi-stakeholder in nature. They're typically dealing with very complex problems. So you'll have somebody from the regulatory perspective, the utility, the city. It's this combination of content experts, decision makers, policy or legal people that need to inform the conversation that really make Accelerator itself a meaningful event. Having the right people at the table as opposed to having conversations around the people that need to be a part of the conversation. So just to get into a little bit of what we talk about in terms of our project themes. So in general, our projects are working on what we call the distribution edge of the electricity system. That's kind of the general categorization of all our teams. But specifically, we have three types that we recruit against, and this is very intentional, in part to leverage the resources of Accelerator, so bringing in the right amount of faculty members, but also to really build this community, so having other teams in the room that are dealing with perhaps similar challenges in different, maybe different areas of the country, bring different perspectives and experience. That combination of building the community and having the right resources is really critical. So our three project themes for 2016, the first one is what we call new business models. And these are projects that explore new utility business models or market structures, perhaps regulatory efforts focused on maximizing the value of DER. And our first guest speaker will actually present a project from 2015 that was representative of a new business model project. So it'll provide a little bit more clarity on what these types of projects can look like. The second one is what we call energy innovation districts and demonstrations. And these are projects that demonstrate or perhaps even pilot innovative DER solutions in perhaps a context like a microgrid or a downtown clean energy zone, or perhaps even a net zero district. And I think one important element of an energy innovation district or demonstration is that it's not something necessarily like tech to market. So you're just looking at trying out a new technology in a pilot project, but you're dealing with other very deep implementation issues. You think about the employment of a microgrid and a lot of the regulatory and ownership questions that arise, and the legal issues and the operation and maintenance questions. And our second guest speaker from 2015 actually is a very good example of an energy innovation district project. Finally, new for 2016 is a category we're calling rate design and DER value creation. And these are projects that are looking at things like new rate designs, compensation mechanisms, perhaps deployment strategies, or even engagement programs that are really focused on this question about DER value creation. We're really excited about this as a new category for 2016, just from some of the initial response that we've had. People are very excited about this category, as are we. So the next thing we'd like to just touch on is, in addition to faculty members at Accelerator, one really critical piece of our process is the role of facilitators. So each of our projects are assigned an RMI facilitator, and this is somebody that works very closely with the project leading up to Accelerator, conducting things like helping to finalize the actual team itself, refining the scope of work that's going to be completed at Accelerator, helping the team think through some initial questions that really get them ready and the team is on the same page, ready to go, and even perhaps identifying needed resources that the team might need leading up to Accelerator. The facilitator then, his primary function is facilitation at the event itself. And so there's an agenda that's this kind of overarching agenda for the event that Leah walked through, but there's also very tailored agendas to each project. So each project has a very specialized agenda to really help them work through the issues that they've come to work on. And the facilitator is a resource during the event to help them walk through that agenda, and also to help think through some of the very difficult questions, applying some of the tools and techniques that we use at Accelerator to really work on creative and experimentation for project ideas. The last thing is a facilitator also provides support after Accelerator, which in our perspective is a really critical piece where the facilitator will help the team maintain momentum after Accelerator, continue that connection to the broader eLab community, and also be a resource for specific questions or support needs that a team might have, like reviewing a proposal that the team is conducting, or helping them think through strategy for working with the community. So those are just examples of what facilitators will do with projects before, during, and after the event. I wanted to spend a little bit of time going through what we call the characteristics of an accelerator project and team. And these are things in our experience that we review when we receive applications from projects, and in fact we'll score against these characteristics. But these are also very helpful to think through what does your project, what makes a good project for Accelerator, and what would you need in terms of a team and a team champion. So just to walk through a couple of these, the first one is the project status. And again, this is something about the kind of the maturity level of a project. Is Accelerator the right time or useful and relevant to this project? Is this project active? Has there been significant support or activity previous to this application? And is there actually a clear project future? So we've actually had several projects in the past that were hypothetical or perhaps really contingent on like a local election or something. And it's really useful for a project to have things like perhaps a future funding mechanism or political support or programmatic mandate that really helps secure kind of the momentum after Accelerator and the usefulness of that intervention. Another thing is the project statement itself, and this is more about really understanding of what the team is working on and what do they need from Accelerator and what do they want to walk away from the event with. And again, this is just more about the clarity of the proposal, the application coming in. One of the more important characteristics of an Accelerator project is what we call project impact potential. And this is a variety of things. It could range from things like direct impact, as well as perhaps like a proof point, answering a key question that the industry or folks might have that can be readily disseminated and serve as a lessons learned or a proof point to the industry. Other things like replicability and scalability is a really important element of impact. A good story, so if there's a really great story to tell through a project that serves to really spread the message of lessons learned or success, and also a platform to lead change. So perhaps there's an organization that has great statewide relationships, and their activities at Accelerator will really lead to impact through this network or this platform that they might have to disseminate those lessons learned. Projects are not going to be necessarily meeting all of these areas of impact, but it's really critical to get multiple areas of impact right for Accelerator projects. The next thing is stakeholder team. We've touched on this a little bit, but really this element of the multi-stakeholder element and nature of teams, that they're diverse, that you have people that can inform the conversation and provide content expertise, but also people that are critical to the actual decision-making around project and project implementation even after Accelerator. So it's really important that the right people are at the table during the event. Finally, team champion. Again, this is something we've mentioned, but it's really someone that's the enthusiastic driver or owner of the project and really able to prepare and sustain efforts during and after Accelerator. Something that is really critical in our experience to many of these projects is a really great team champion. With that, we'd love to transition to introducing two of our projects from 2015, and they're here to provide a little bit of insight as to what they worked on at Accelerator, but also to just mention some highlights about the application process. What should projects really think about as they're applying or putting together their project proposal for Accelerator? Our first project is Renewable Taos project, and speaking will be Jay Levine. He's a board member in particular of Renewable Taos. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Jay.
Hi, everybody. This is Jay Levine. I'm with Renewable Taos, Inc., and we're here to talk about what we did last year, actually earlier this year at eLab Accelerator. Can you next slide, please? Great. So you can see a little bit about our project, but just in brief, Kit Carson Electric Co-op, which is our local energy provider, has a contract with Tri-State Transmission, and that contract says that Kit Carson can only generate 5% of its power locally. So for Renewable Taos, our objectives are to get to 100% renewables by 2030, and that's across all energy sectors. But in working with Kit Carson, they're limited, very limited to how much they can do. So for Renewable Taos, we were looking at a way to get us to that 100% mark. What could we do to solve the problems with this 5% of local generation? So that's what we brought to the eLab Accelerator. That's the project we brought to eLab Accelerator. How do we get to 100%? What's the business model? What are the possibilities? Great. Next. Okay, so what we did before this, before eLab. Renewable Taos has been active for over 3 years. We've been meeting weekly. We have a good core group of about 6 or 7 people, and we've actually recently added a couple more, which has been great. For us at Renewable Taos, the biggest thing for us was renewable power, obviously, but the other thing is local generation. So in order to do all these things, we first realized we had to get some education going in the local area. We had to educate the public that this is all possible and what we wanted to do. We also had to work with our local politicians and other folks to get them to understand these things are all possible. They're all, and this local generation, local economic development was also really possible. And so with Renewable Taos, we started meeting with some folks, and I think it was the mayor of Taos suggested we do a joint resolution so that we can, it's a great way to kind of get everybody to sign on board, but also a great way to start interacting with politicians and other folks in the community. So that was one of the first things we did after we started our local political initiatives. And we got all the local municipalities in the Kit Carson service area, which is Taos County and a little bit of the nearby Colfax County. And we got Taos County involved. We got Kit Carson Electric Co-op also passed it. One of the local school boards passed it. And it was a great way to go around the Enchanted Circle and meet all these folks and just get everybody started the conversation. So one of the big things about this is, in order for Renewable Taos to be effective, we felt like we had to raise the visibility of Renewable Taos. So that was one of the first steps. And the other things we've been doing are lecture series. And we've had, I think we've done 4 or 5 or maybe 6 lectures in the past couple of years. Our most recent one earlier this year was on the morals and ethics of climate change and what our personal responsibilities are. And the last thing is we're really lucky to have a very progressive co-op in Kit Carson Electric. Luis Reyes, the CEO, and Kit Carson in general have been very progressive. I'm pretty sure I know in Mexico we're the only co-op that's actually coming up against this 5% mark. All the other co-ops are not even close, and I think up until this year or maybe late last year, none of the other co-ops have done much of anything in the renewable area. Next slide. All right, so at eLab Accelerator, we were kind of looking at what was the possible way to move forward. How can Renewable Taos achieve its goals? How can we do all these things without really harming Kit Carson Electric Co-op? Because Kit Carson still has to run the grid. There's still a lot of folks here who need power. So how do we kind of bring the two together? And one of the things that also early on is we've been meeting with Luis Reyes, CEO of Kit Carson Electric, and talking with other folks because we really. And part of this is, again, I mentioned before, economic development. It's a really poor county, poor area, and we want to not only enable the folks who can afford solar on their roof, but we want everybody to be able to kind of get in this renewable revolution. And the other thing is that Tri-State has been raising the prices on us. I think the average nationwide is 3 or 4% of rise in electrical costs every year. And so we want to see if we can stabilize the cost. So those are a couple of things we were talking about. One of the things we talked about early on at Accelerator was business as usual. What happens with the process as it is now? As more folks put solar on their roof, as other companies do the same, and what happens to those who are left buying power from Kit Carson? And as far as we can tell, that's not a really good outcome. Because those that are left end up paying the grid, end up paying more for power because we're going to be using less. So that was part of the discussion. The next part of the discussion was the business models. What can we do to enable this whole revolution to continue in the Taos area? How do we get to this 100% mark, or how do we even get to a 50% with the whole Kit Carson constraint? They can only do 5% of local generation. So out of all this, a really interesting idea was born. We could start we'll call it a new nonprofit entity to sell power electricity in the in the Kit Carson service area. So this is a really unique idea. We were thinking that we would start this new entity. It would buy renewable. It would build renewables and build out local generation, and it would start to sell to folks in the Kit Carson service area. And so people who wanted to buy power from this new entity would become members of this new entity, and it would be their sole power provider. And we would share the grid with Kit Carson, but this new company would provide all their power. And so that was the beginnings of our idea. And as we looked forward and looked around at other ideas that we had, this was the only one that seemed like it was viable. The only one that seemed like it could solve the problems that we were looking to solve, meaning get to 100% renewable. And our stated goal is 2030. And we think we can do this much more quickly, but that's our goal. And so one of the awesome things about being an accelerator was that we had access to some really great people, RMI principals, and some of the faculty that RMI brought in really helped us to think this through and to think through some of the issues, and it just seemed like the best way forward and the best possibility for Renewable Taos to get to its goal and to help local people in the Taos area to achieve their goals, which a lot of folks really want to have renewables, and not a lot of them can afford to do it themselves. Next slide. So Renewable Taos has been really busy over the last, 7 months or so. We've been doing what basically are cost analysis, looking at the current cost, looking at the current levels of how much we pay for things, looking at the possible ways to do this in the future. What would, for example, one of the things we modeled out was it looks like our Kit Carson Electric's peak is around 60 some odd megawatts in early January. We're a winter peaker, which is somewhat unusual. And so compare that to our summer lows and other things. Is we typically, we modeled it out that about 32 megawatts or so, give or take, was the max that we could build in solar in our local area without having to think about dumping, and basically which raises our costs, dumping power after that. So that's one of the things we modeled out. We also did a lot of work. We created this white paper to really describe what we did at the Lab Accelerator, describe some of the things that we need to look into, the things we need to cost out, to figure it all out, to see if we could actually form this new entity, and if it actually could survive. It could make enough money to build out what we want to build out, if what the customers, how many customers we'd have to bring on, and lots of other things that were really interesting. If you can see the white paper at renewabletaos.org if you want to look at that and see more about how that worked. Let me see, what else? Right, so we're pretty much through all the planning we had to do and the research on this, and it's been going really well, and RMI's been so helpful on it. And so, as with everything, and especially in the electricity sectors, things are changing. And really, in the past 2 weeks, it looks like all this is going to change. And all our work was helpful and got us to a really good place. But in the last 2 weeks, we found out that it's possible Kit Carson might be buying itself out of the contract with Tri-State, which, of course, changes a lot of things. All our modeling still helps. It helps us to figure out where to go forward. But a lot of other things will be done differently. And so now we're in the process of trying to figure out how that works. And we still haven't gotten a lot of information from Kit Carson because they're still in their negotiations. And the only reason I'm really talking about it because there was a newspaper article about it last week, which kind of brought it out into the sunlight. So that's really exciting, and all these things are really exciting. And there's a lot more work to do. So I know that Renewable Taos is going to be busy for the foreseeable future trying to make this all happen.
So thank you guys very much for having me. My name is Caleb Stratton. I'm the principal planner for the City of Hoboken, and last year we participated in the eLabs. I was the team champion for my team. And before I get started talking about what our project is about, I wanted to give you two pieces that I took away from my experience. The first thing is with the application, definitely tell a story. Be compelling. Identify what your problem is and what you expect for an outcome, and deliver a story that doesn't leave any question whether or not they should select your team to participate. I think that that's very important. And one of my favorite things about Accelerator, which is something for you to think about as you go into the project, is that we weren't wearing suits and we weren't in the boardroom, and I wasn't sitting at a table where I knew the position of every person I was speaking to, and it was a great equalizer. So think about how you want to use your time effectively at the event for messaging and developing stakeholders for your project with the unique team that you have around you, because I found the fact that I could speak to a member of the DPU and a member of our local utility as peers within the project and not within the hierarchy of where we were in the organization was super helpful, and I felt like I created stakeholders. So next slide. We are an urban coastal city, and in 2012, during Hurricane Sandy, we were flooded. 70% of the city flooded, including our 3 substations. Our city was out of power for 2 weeks, and we experienced transit, business, and service disruption for months. And following that event, we took a very hard look at what our vulnerabilities were, and we decided to embark on a journey with Sandy National Labs, as well as our public utility and our regulator, and look at how we could power the city under a certain design condition, which was a flood condition, and do that for our most critical facilities. And what we came up with was a different utility business model, but also something that we were at a bit of an impasse prior to going to Lab Accelerator. Next slide. So leading up to Accelerator, we formalized a memorandum of understanding. So the memorandum allowed us to operate with the utility and the regulator in a way that was a lot less complicated, and we were able to discuss issues that preceded policy that the state had released to talk about how we actually accomplish our design objectives. We developed an actual plan, so an implementation plan for the microgrid, and what we used eLab for was to frame our big picture issues, which were primarily regulatory and financial, and to ask the question in a room where we have access to experts that are leaders in their field. So our project team leader, who is Lee Buccioni, knows what she's talking about. She was able to pull out of us the questions that we didn't have answers to, and she was also able to connect us with the different resources. So a couple of the people, Sunil and Carl, they actually sat down and put pen to paper with us and helped us draw out what kind of our big picture issue was, which was how to create a financial model to implement our project. And I'll say that using, for all of you who are making an application or all of you who are trying to work through these issues, use those people, the team leaders, and the project specialists to the best of your ability. Do your research on who they are and what they do before you go to the Accelerator, because they are big people in their field and they know what they're talking about. So next slide, please. One of the greatest outcomes from Accelerator was our Sandy and National Labs design looked at almost exclusively performance of the system. So what is the highest performance microgrid that we can build? And what we found was that we needed to optimize our system, and that optimization occurred through understanding what we could financially afford and also what kind of performance we could expect out of a microgrid. What we found was that we needed to do a much larger and more centralized generator and monetize the different resiliency benefits, which are different than reliability benefits, and monetize the services that we would be providing to these public or quasi-non-profit agencies. And what eLabs did for us is they helped us frame the specific financial issues that we had and helped us work within a regulatory framework that allowed us a pathway for implementation that didn't require legislative changes. And they also provided, working with our project manager, we were able to clearly define what the incentives were for the city, for our utility, and for our regulator to play within the system. The BPU received a model to encourage these resiliency investments that were programmatic goals for the state of New Jersey following Hurricane Sandy. The utility got a piece of a new offering within their utility package that they could sell resiliency investments and recoup whatever those investments for. And the cities are now able to, or Hoboken, who we're going to do the first pilot, is we are able to say we are happy with our reliability, but because of our vulnerability of assets, we want this additional service. So next slide. So what we really got out of Accelerator was consensus between the big project stakeholders, and what I felt as a member of the city was that we created champions within PSC&G and our Board of Public Utilities for our project, and that had not happened prior to the Accelerator. And coming out of Accelerator, actually our greatest project champion was the public utility, and encouraging us to pursue the microgrid. They're rewriting portions of the Energy Master Plan and producing a white paper that will facilitate the development of our project. We had exposure to so many different resources. We've had corporations come to us and not-for-profits to support the project. Specifically, EDF provided an intern for us over the summer where we worked on a toolkit to deploy this strategy further in the northeast in New Jersey. And then we were also given a timeline and accelerator, which makes us be honest about what we can achieve within a reasonable time, but then also pushes us to accelerate the project, perhaps more so than if there was no other entity pushing this project forward. And I think that the presentation that I'm able to do today and the support that we received from Rocky Mountain, it was really, for us, was the catalyst that propelled us to the next level. And if I can say anything about eLabs, that it was really a safe and collaborative environment, and it's important to go into eLabs with some expectation of what they can do for you, but also an expectation of yourself to ask and be able to answer some of those really challenging questions. So thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it, and keep up the hard work.
We'd like to just focus on some of the last elements of this presentation in terms of the timeline to Accelerator, some of the details of the application, and then Q&A. And again, our apologies for the audio difficulties. So just to wrap up on applications itself, so timeline to Accelerator. Currently, we're right in the middle of application phase. Our applications are due January 4th, and we'll be sending out final invitations mid-February for arriving at Sundance for accelerated participation in April 24th. There's a number of questions on our application. It's actually a fairly short application, approximately 3 pages. And there's a couple of questions here just to outline some of the content that we're looking for. And most of this you'll recognize is kind of aligned with the selection criteria, the characteristics of a project that we're looking for. So things around project description and discussion about who would be on the multi-stakeholder team, what other stakeholders' expertise might be needed, a little bit of info about the project champion or champions to date, project progress, and really looking at what barriers or questions that the project is seeking to address at Accelerator. There's 2 things I wanted to highlight. One is our staff here, both on the Accelerator team and at RMI, are available and willing to work with teams on their application. So this is something we envision as a conversation leading up to a final application submission. And this is in part to ensure kind of the strong nature of the applications, but really to help through the teams to think about some of these complex questions around the teams, the multi-stakeholder teams, refining the scope of the question to make sure that it's well positioned for a lot of impact work at Accelerator. The other thing I wanted to mention is the multi-stakeholder team. This is often one of the more difficult elements of the project to really understand who needs to be at the table, but also to recruit those folks for the team. That's something that our team here is willing and able to help out with, but also recognizing that this doesn't have to be finalized at the time of application. So we recognize that there might be a core team that's recognized and identified in the application itself, but there might be several folks that are fleshed out at the remainder of the time leading up to Accelerator itself. There's a link at the bottom of this slide to our actual application online. Just a little bit about more details on project selection. So projects are selected on a rolling basis. So if we receive an application tomorrow and it is a very strong application, we can immediately accept that application and start the conversation about finalizing the team, developing an agenda, and getting things ready for Accelerator. Based on our scoring system, there's several projects that might score very high and that are kind of initially selected through this rolling basis, but a majority of projects are going to be deferred to our January close time. And in part, this is given the nature of having projects clumped in these project themes, that we're trying to ensure the best mix of teams in addition to individual application strength. So most projects will be reviewed in kind of late January, with final invitations sent out in mid-February. So with that, we'd love to turn it over to Q&A, and we've been tracking your questions via the chat window. And with that, we'll turn it over to Leah for questions.
Sure. So I'm sitting here with Courtney looking at the different questions that have come in. And one of the first questions is, would you consider an emerging 2030 district as a qualifying project? We are in the early stages. Without knowing more about the project, other than sort of what is maybe obvious from the question, I think that absolutely could be a potential project. In our Energy Innovation Districts category, we've worked with a number of different types of district developments, some that are redevelopments or community-oriented projects where there's already existing development. But we've also worked with communities where there's a brownfield or greenfield opportunity that they're looking to invest in, and they want it to become a beacon of energy innovation. And so I think that would probably be a great project, and we'd love to learn about it some more. What is the cost of participating in eLab Accelerator? We tried very hard to make this event as affordable as possible and to be priced consistently with what you might find for an industry conference. So we asked our participants to pay a participant fee, and that participant fee is $1,300. That participation fee includes your lodging at Sundance, it includes your meal at Sundance, and it also goes towards some of the facilities and materials fees for the events. We're fortunate that we have philanthropic support that covers RMI and Rios and our faculty cost of preparing for the event and working with the teams before the event. So the participation fee is $1,300. We do offer a limited number of scholarships for qualified individuals who need financial assistance in order to attend. And those are reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and we're happy to discuss the scholarship options, the scholarship possibilities with anyone in particular if that's of interest. So the next question, if you're going to have a rep from your regional utility on the team, does it make sense to have the utility be the lead on the project? This is a great question, and I would say it can go either way. We, last year for our 2015 event, had a utility, at least one utility representative or participant on every one of our 12 teams. Now, in some of those teams, the utility was actually the team champion behind the team, and in some ways they were sort of the initiator or driving force between the project. We also had just as many teams where the utility was not the champion behind the team, but was an eager and active participant. So it really could go either way, and that's the type of thing that Jason, myself, and our team here at RMI are really happy to discuss with you to figure out what makes the most sense for your particular project. So I'll pass this question to Jason. Jason, how are the projects funded?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So a mix of our projects last year were project funded. So some of them had funding from the projects themselves. There was already a scope of work in place and some kind of initial project progress, but the team was really wrestling with key questions or really trying to overcome some of the challenges of the project in that were very complex or required many people at the table to address. Other projects are perhaps locally funded through a community. So one of our projects came from Bloomfield, Iowa last year, and there was significant funding from the city itself, if I remember correctly, and the community to support that team in coming. It's almost like a local sponsorship. There's also great opportunity for local or even regional philanthropic funding for teams to attend Accelerator, and that's something, again, that we're happy to discuss with folks, perhaps even provide some ideas for that type of localized philanthropic funding. So there's actually a wide variety of mix for actual project funding. Some of it, again, is project-based. There's already kind of a scope of work in place. There might be some type of sponsorship, whether it's local or regional, or maybe an organization might sponsor a number of folks to attend. And there's also perhaps philanthropic funding that might be available for teams to attend.
Yeah, and just one further note on that is how to find funding is very often one of the questions that teams will actually work on while they're at Accelerator. And we've had several teams who thought about that in particular and how to attract private capital or third-party funding as part of their project as a critical challenge that they needed to overcome. And then we also have some great success stories of teams who, as a consequence of the work that they did at Accelerator, left Accelerator and were able to go after new sources of funding successfully. And we're happy to share those stories with you offline or perhaps connect you with those teams. There is a clarification question that's come in around the participant fee. And that participation fee is per person. It's not per team. So that $1,300 is per individual. So what are some of the next questions? Oh, fantastic. This is another, I'll pass this to Jason. Would you accept an application from British Columbia, Canada?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So actually last year we had several applications from outside of the contiguous U.S. In North America. So Alaska, Hawaii, Canada, the islands. So we're more than happy to entertain questions outside of what we call the lower 48. There's just so many great problems and projects that people are working on and addressing that we are really excited to support and provide resources for through Accelerator. So great question. Yes, absolutely.
Do you have any other questions? So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We will coordinate with Jay and Caleb to record their stories and include those in the recording that's available for people to review. So that way, if you have particular curiosities about what our teams from Taos and Hoboken accomplished this past year and what they're up to now, we want to be able to share that with you. Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to explore our website further and contact us if you're interested in being a part of eLab Accelerator 2016.